I'd like to call the Finance Committee meeting to order at 5:18. Item 1, well, that was item 1. Item 2, roll call. Tom Barney.
Here.
And Russ Ewert.
Here.
And Michael Loth. I am here. Item 3, agenda revisions and approval.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion by Tom, second by Russ Ewert. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. Item 4, approval of minutes. Approval of the December 19th, 2022 meeting minutes.
Make a motion to approve the December 19th, 2022 meeting minutes.
Second.
Okay, motion by Russ Ewert, second by Tom Barney for the meeting minutes. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries. Item 5, consent, review, and discuss January and February vouchers. And Brittany.
I received 2 questions regarding the January vouchers. It was brought to my attention, which moving forward, if we do not have a finance committee during the month, we will have the vouchers move forward to the full board for approval so they can proceed to get paid. In January, we did not have a committee meeting and they did not go to full board. So moving forward, we'll have that so that questions can be answered and the vouchers can move forward. But the 2 questions I received for January were regarding long distance, how we're charged currently for long distance, and the answer is yes, we are. But we are moving forward to getting away from copper fax lines. The long distance is for faxing only, it's not for phone calls. So starting in the month of March, we will no longer have copper fax lines. We will be moving to what's called an e-fax, which you might be familiar with. You can fax from your emails as well as the fax machine, but it won't use long distance. So those you should see go away. Not very expensive, but again, something we should have changed. The other question I received was regarding a payment for $3,848.50 to American Capital Finance, or for American Capital Finance to Quarles and Brady. The reason we have to have this is because every year we have a lease for our Chromebooks or our technology, and it may be Chromebooks for staff or students, but we do have to pay for a legal opinion and for them to review the lease agreement, so that will always occur for Quarles and Brady. Any other voucher questions that I was not sent?
Well, that's all. So the long distance charges were under $1, I believe, and my concern there is I don't know how much it costs per item for the school to process, but in the private sector, in a large company, it could be maybe $150 to $200 per charge by the time it clears through all people that see it. I don't know if you have a number on what it costs,
no.
Overhead for charges, but the actual cost of doing paperwork is quite high in the private sector. So I just kind of felt like, hey, we shouldn't be paying whatever, I forget what the numbers were now, but $1 for long distance and let's say $100 to process it through the office. The number might be higher than you think.
It may be, yes. This one, for example, was 57 cents, and then the long distance line was $6.52. So
Right. So that was my concern. And then the other, American Capital Finance, I thought it might have been related to the referendum refinancing. So I was just checking on that to see what we were looking at. So very good. Glad to hear it. It was actually for Chromebooks.
Mm-hmm. So it will be an annual expense.
Okay. Very good. I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the consent to payment vouchers as presented and reviewed.
Second.
Okay, motion by Tom Barney, second by Russ Ewert. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. Item 6, reports and updates. OPEB, and hopefully that's defined somewhere in here, but,
It is on the cover page.
okay, very good. Great. I just didn't want to use it without it being defined in the paperwork. That would be hypocritical. So, Mike Nowak, thanks for coming tonight.
Bet, thank you. So there's been some discussion in the last several weeks about post-employment benefits. The term OPEB stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. Specifically, that means benefits outside of pension distributions that employees would receive in retirement. In this case, pension distributions would be through the Wisconsin retirement system, and then those post-employment benefits would be things potentially like health insurance, life insurance, deferred compensation, and maybe some other things. You have in front of you handbook language from each of our 4 work groups, being teachers, administrators, professional, technical, and support staff. Our employment or post-employment benefits in those 4 areas can kind of be chunked into 2 areas. Our teachers and administrators have somewhat similar benefits, then professional, technical, and support staff have somewhat similar benefits. The handbook language, as you can see if you've gone through it, spells out what the requirements are to receive these benefits, and then it goes into what the benefits actually are. In the case of teachers and administrators, the general idea is if you meet the requirements, the benefit is upon the age of 57 and 15 years for teachers, 10 years for administrators. There is health insurance up to 96 months or reaching the age of 65 or the age of Medicare, at which point it would sunset, and that insurance is at the rate of active employees. So on a year-to-year basis it would change if that rate changes for active employees. On the support staff and professional technical side, the main benefit is unused sick time. The benefit is 1/2 of the daily rate of any unused sick time that the employee has accrued in their time. So with that said, we thought this may be a starting point for some discussion. Many districts have looked at these types of benefits and explored modifications. We have a pretty good understanding of what next steps would be relative to analysis. I think Brittany will speak a little bit to what that process will be, the concept of liability to the district, and what next steps would entail.
Very good. I was the one that asked for this to be put on the agenda. Do you have anything, Brittany, tonight, or is that it?
No, I don't really have anything. I think it was just to start the conversation. Mike did say this was brought to the board in past years. I don't know the history of.
Yeah,
I think to couch it for this evening, Mike's information is to make sure that everyone understood what the benefit was for each
Right,
employee
right.
group, so there was a solid foundational understanding, which then, as if the board would want to move forward with any other information, we could come forward with that.
Okay. Yeah, so this was last. You'd have to be on the board for a while to know anything about this at all. It was brought up, and I'd have to go back and see, but it was probably 4 or 5 years ago now. There was some analysis done on this, I believe by an outside firm, and it was the previous business manager. So we're just looking at future health insurance expenses, and down the road, the costs were high enough that there was no way the district could plan for those costs today or invest funds today to cover those costs in the future. The numbers were going, they were going astronomical with the current rate of health insurance increases. So that's why the conversation was started, 4 or 5 years ago. We had a business manager change, and it was just dropped. So that's the reason for bringing it up. I don't know. Do you think, is there anything else we need to talk about tonight, or? I think my understanding is that other districts are not doing this. They're not providing health insurance to retirees any longer. So I think we should look into, those types of things. We do studies all the time, right? Starting teacher pay, other benefits, health insurance benefits, what are the costs, what are out of pocket. All of these things, I think we should look at other districts for this also and make sure, that we're on par with other districts. So I don't think this is an issue today. We're doing pretty well for a pay as we go, but as I recall, the numbers became quite high in about 15 years. Now, that was 5 years ago when that first study was done. I did not look prior to this meeting to see if any of that material was still, on our website. It might be. But it might be worth taking a look at just to see if it was, if it was accurate, or if it was a guess, by the firm that completed that study.
Yeah, I do recall that night when we were talking about it. I think it was we were at one of our elementaries.
We were at
right?
Rockfield.
It was a cold night.
Yep, I remember it very well.
Yeah, we have fairly good understanding of what many of our area districts are doing. Many of them have made modifications. I think in the metropolitan area, there's definitely, I think we'll find that our districts are still committed to offering benefits, but what they've done is they've sort of done some phasing relative to what do they look like in the next 5 years, the next 10 years, so on and so forth, moving forward. So we can look at that as we have this discussion. Bob's talked about this. We typically look at it as the three pieces: salary, insurance, and any post-employment benefits that exist relative to where we are competitively. And this is part of that process. So.
Right, very good. Yeah, I don't know why for some reason I remember it. I think it was in February. We're doing the school, meetings at different schools, which we haven't been doing lately, but it was Rockfield, I'm quite sure.
Yeah.
Yes, Russ?
I have, I'll call it a plethora of questions surrounding this that probably cannot be answered right now, but things I think I would need to know before as we continue this discussion is, what is the expense to the district? What's the projected expense to the district? How does that quantify into recruitment and retention? And if we're not choosing to, or we do choose to, if we specifically we're not, those funds, how do they get reallocated? Because I wouldn't like to see them go anywhere but back into some sort of staff compensation. I wouldn't want them used for any other district want specifically. I would really not like that. We do have budget restrictions. We do work within those, I think, fairly well. We're on a great path to be doing that and to continue to do that. But to have a benefit similar to this in the field that I'm in, I know it's greatly factored into my retirement, and I can only imagine our staff do factor that in, or at least some of them I'm sure do. It is a savings to them. And I would, without knowing the totality of this, you know, all right, so we need to know the totality of that beforehand, or as we continue the discussion, but specifically then what will we do with the funds in regards specifically to staff retention and compensation. Those are my stuff. Won't off the top of my head, obviously. Looked at this for a little bit now, but things I need to know before.
So would a next step be for members of the committee to share with Mike, or members of the board to share with Mike those type of questions, and the next phase of a report? Now that everyone has the foundational information, next phase is total cost. What does this look like 5 years down the road? Some of the things that are brought up here, then that would enact what's the next discussion to move from there.
I would think that, and staff input.
Sure.
We need to hear from the staff on what their views are on it. It's a changing world. People don't stay in the same, call it work location like they used to, but I don't necessarily know if that is true or not true in regards to education. I know it's generally not in law enforcement. We're in it for our long haul. But as the world changes and opportunities arise, we're competing with more and more, so.
Sure.
Yeah, I would say if we can generate some of those questions, I think it will prompt a lot of shared education of the big picture of this too. You know, the impact of utilizing health insurance as a benefit, as opposed to some type of defined benefit that will change down the road. Short of, you know, kind of getting into all kinds of ideas of things that could be done, those are just some of the general ideas that we're looking at. It's I'll share. I study kind of our workforce relative to ages, the number of people that are eligible to retire, how many do, and it's very interesting of late to see that changing a little bit. And I don't know why it is, but it doesn't seem people are as quick to retire as they once were. Some of that might be the economy. Some of that might be just uncertainty about things. I don't know. Maybe cost of our own health insurance. But those are all things that kind of factor into this. And I think, you know, what I'm hearing is we have to learn and we have to collectively evolve. And, you know, obviously our staff will be part of that process.
All right, I think we can move on. I'll take a look and see if it's online yet. That last study, the last study might have gone out 30 years, but I'm not sure on that. It at least went out 20. I'm pretty sure of that. Let's face it, probably none of us will be here in 20 years. I'll be lucky to live that long, but I think on this day it's still worth taking care of future taxpayers, you know, in the Germantown School District. You know, we can't just let it go. We can't keep kicking the can down the road. So we do need to take a look at it and see where we're at. I think it's difficult to budget for, although I'm sure you are looking, Brittany, at each year's budget. How many retirees do we have? And I think the issue is a little bit different now because we are self-insured, correct? So we're
So we do currently budget for the current retirees. So we have a line item in the budget so we can track how much the current retirees' health insurance is costing us. We just don't fund for the future.
right, it's a pay-as-we-go system, which, based on the numbers in the last study, was very scary for the budget. You know, if you think we have budget problems today, this study was really made future budgets look tough, really tough. So we've got to look at it. We really do. Okay, if there's no other questions, we can move on. Item 6B, financial update, and this is Brittany Altendorf.
I just wanted to give a financial update on a couple of areas, just so the board is aware. Annually, we do take out 2 line of credits or borrows. That basically means that we have funds available to us. In past years, we used to borrow a large amount, and then it would stay in our bank account, and then we would pay it back. We did move to a line of credit in the past, I don't know, 5-6 years, in which the money would sit with the bank, but we would pull it as needed. A couple of years ago, it did change that you do pay interest on the money that is sitting with them as well as the money that you pull. Previous line of credits was you only paid interest on the money that you pulled out, but the banks were seeing that people had money available that they didn't pull, and they were losing money by not being able to borrow it to somebody else. So you pay a smaller amount if it's sitting in there, and then a slightly larger amount if you pull the funds. So we did get board approval for up to $6.5 million in September of last year, of 2022, and we did only pull $2 million of that. So when we come out for the board approval in June, we see every year that the amount that we are asking for the line of credit is getting smaller and smaller, and that is due to our fund balance increasing. We did receive some funds that were designated in fund balance, so that did help us not have to pull. But when we use those funds, because they're projected to be used on one-time expenditures, those funds will no longer be available in our fund balance. So we are going to come back in June and ask for our annual borrow then, but we are going to come up with a smaller dollar amount that's, I guess, more practical, so we're not paying for the interest of the money that's sitting in there. But we did pay $26,146 of interest on the $2 million that we did borrow between the months of October and January. So that's just an update so the board's aware. It was less than we did the previous September, which is a positive. Another area that I wanted the board to be informed about is in November, during my variance report, I informed the board that we did receive $351,366 in one-time funds called Back to School Supplement Aid. It is now designated. We are moving money to be designated in fund balance, so it doesn't look like our fund balance is growing for non-designated money. I don't want to just say the fund balance continues to grow when it's earmarked for certain items. So we are moving the funds into a designated line into our general ledger. So these funds, again, are only one-time funds, and it would be, I think, our recommendation in the future to use it for curriculum reviews. We are going through multiple curriculum audits, so right now it's designated, or not designated, it's put over there without a specific use for it, but knowing we are going through curriculum reviews, those might be future large expenses depending on what the curriculum is that we're purchasing. Maybe a reading curriculum, obviously it's costing more than a math curriculum, so we don't want to have to, similar to post-employment benefits, to try to come up with the money that year. So these funds have to be used by December 31st of 2026, so we have a while. It can sit in fund balance designated for as long as we need it to. If we turn out we do not need it for curriculum, it will come to the board for whatever we'd like to use it for, just to know that it's available in fund balance right now. Any questions on either one of those two? Otherwise, I have a third item that's just a quick update.
Oh, I'll just add, I appreciate that it being earmarked in that direction, knowing the amount of work that I'm seeing being done in that area of curriculum review, it's adopting standards, prioritizing, and and knowing the work that's gonna come ahead as we get a stronger, more defined, well-defined curriculum in place across the district and across multiple disciplines in the district, knowing that those funds are there so Jake and his team can do that work and get us the best available stuff to bring in or supplement or continue to use. It's a little bit of a stress relief to see that there's some of that there.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Can't think of any.
Okay.
I think we've got the right guy looking into our curriculum to use those funds when the time comes. That's all I have.
And then the last item that I just wanted to bring up, that in January of every year, we start budgeting for the next school year. The budget process, as you know, goes from January until October when we have the annual meeting. So we are in a biennial budget. There are a lot of unknowns when it comes to the biennial budget because it has to go through all legislation. So we project as much as we possibly can. But as you know, the state puts in their suggestions, and then it has to go through the whole legislative process, and then what they're asking for usually does not come to fruition. They ask for everything, and then it's usually brought back. So the scenarios that we're running right now are conservative, but we are running multiple scenarios just so we are prepared. The process we're going through right now, as you see here, we pulled a list of all vendors that we pay over $2,500 during the 21-22 school year, and we're just taking a deep dive into is the contract we're in with that vendor, could it be renegotiated? Could it be combined with another service? Is it the right vendor? Is it the vendor that we've always used? Is it, so we've had a list of, I think there was, it was really long. So we went through it, and each person that was responsible for that vendor took a deep dive into the purchase and then came back and explained if it was needed, if they're looking into it, if they're gonna try to renegotiate it, if it's not needed, if it's something that they weren't aware of. So we've are continuing with that. As of right now. And then in February, the district office departments have gone through the zero-based budgeting process. This is their third year, but the sites have not gone through the full zero-based budgeting process. Their budgets are based on enrollment right now, but they are going to, starting in February, go through the process in which they take their previous year expenditures and they break them into contractual, operational, and strategic categories. So we know that if you're under contract, or if it's something that we need and we're under contract for, that's not really a consideration that we're going to look into. That could be a reduction. And then operational, what they need to run their building, what they need to run their department, and then if it's that they need more money in one area or less money in the other area, or to be successful in the school or the program that they're in, if they need additional funds, then that would be supported, but they should all be reviewed. So every 3 years the sites will be going through that. There shouldn't be dramatic changes, I guess, at the school site level on expenses unless a new program is starting or a program is being removed. For example, elementary supplies are usually elementary supplies year over year. So I don't want them to have to go through the zero-based budgeting process every single year. So the years that they don't go through this entire process, it will be based on a 3 count for their enrollment, the September, the January, and a September average, and then they'll get a per pupil dollar amount, which they've received these last few years. Any questions on it?
I don't have any, but thank you for going through this. Russ?
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I don't have anything.
Okay, I had similar to what I think you were about to do. I apologize for interrupting. It's amazing sitting in on or around this process to see the district convert from the prior budgeting system, if I even want to dare call it that, to the zero-based budgeting, and I think everyone on that side of the room can attest to the work that goes into it and the demands it puts on each section of the district. But it's definitely by no means a 30,000-foot project. It is in the weeds. It's finite to dollars and cents, and it only sets this district up for success in the long term. It's going to allow us to budget better, more accurately. It'll allow us in the future to make better decisions across the board, whether it comes to retention, recruitment, equipment. It really is an interesting process to see take place, and it's not by any means a small project. So I just appreciate you leading the way and the directors jumping in and doing their part to manage their side of it. I know it's a change, so. Anyway.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Brittany and Chris. And we will move on to item 6C, 2022-2023 budget adjustments.
In February of every year, if there are budget adjustments, they have to come to the board. Actually, anytime there are budget adjustments throughout the year, they have to come to the board for approval. But in February, we try to make all of the adjustments. Between the months of October and January, we get our final grant rollover amounts. We estimate them as much as we possibly can prior to that. We receive our final library aid amount. Again, we try to project as much as we possibly can. We did get our 4K startup grant, but it's a little different than our normal grants because we don't get the dollar amount, the actual final dollar amount, or the actual money until June. So the year's over before you're even told how much money you're getting. So when we got our award letter stating that we were going to get a certain dollar amount per student, we budgeted and estimated of how many 4K students we were going to get in that dollar amount. Then we got another follow-up letter that says you were going to get less money than you thought you were going to get, and so we based it on how many students that we had, which we had more students than we projected. So it kind of balanced out, but that was added to the budget. So you can see an increase in the Fund 10 expenditures budget of, it was $46 million, and now it's $46.4 million. The majority of that is us adding the ESSER dollars to it. The ESSER dollars, revenue and expenditures, were not in the budget because we didn't know exactly what we were going to spend those funds on. So we wanted to update that, and then we also updated the amount of money we are getting for grants, library aid, and then our final, what we believe is our final best estimate for our 4K grant. We did also move some budgets. If we were looking to, if there was going to be a deficit in one area, we did move funds from a different area of the budget to that area. So you might see an increase in one over the other. We are having a deficit in a transportation budget, so we are going to try to reuse some of the available funds in other places to cover for some specialized transportation that we have. Questions on that?
Yeah, transportation, we just for the record, we're purchasing fuel, I believe at cost, and it's stored at the bus company, and it goes into the buses used to make our runs. So if the price of diesel jumps a lot, this is probably where the deficit is coming from, I imagine, right?
We have some, we do get a monthly get a fuel bill, so you are correct. We also have some specialized transportation that we did not budget for at the beginning of the year that we're still looking into to see if it can be, we can have a more cost-effective way of transporting some of our students.
Okay. All right, I will entertain a motion. Tom?
We don't have any action item for this agenda item. on our agenda.
Oh, because it's through reports and updates?
Right.
And we don't have to have a recommendation, it's going to full board anyway, so I can
Yeah,
start
so
the
that
whole-
would have been
Which is
my
perfectly fine.
comment is, yeah, let's just put it on the full board
Okay.
agenda.
Mhm. And I'm gonna have more detail of it when it comes to the full board agenda, so it will say the actual line items.
We get a little bit better explanation as far as that special ed transportation.
Specialized
Yeah,
transportation.
sorry, yeah.
Now we're at the board meeting.
And probably just at the full board meeting, I'm not gonna put you on the spot with it, but I'd like to have an understanding of what happened.
Okay, moving on. Item 6D, ESSER update. And it's Brittany Altendorf.
It's gonna be a combination of myself and some of the other directors. This is again, an ESSER update. We did do an update previously on the 4 focus areas of mitigation, mental health, safety, and loss of learning, at our last committee meeting. We were then, I guess, went back to what our initial suggestion or recommendation was, because we had a total of about $2.3 million, including air conditioning at all our schools. We narrowed that down to just the middle school. So each person is going to give an update on their focus area and their updated dollar amount that they have compared to the last time that we met. So we can start with whoever's on the top. Is Frank.
Yes, so I've reached out to the 3 Ahern, Butters Fetting, and Dillett Mechanical. I met with all of them at Kennedy to do a walkthrough, to do our best to work around needing any sort of architect or engineer at the front end, and to see what we could tie into without sacrificing, you know, the quality and efficiency moving forward. But obviously, if we can save on materials, best things best. So we do have 2 options that we've kind of boiled down to. That would be, right now we have 1 chiller there. So we would keep that chiller and add 1 other smaller chiller, which would handle the blue gym, and then get a rooftop unit for the gold gym. That would handle the gym, I'm sorry, yeah, that's correct, gold gym. And the blue gym would be covered, again, on that other boilers, or on the chiller side. So that's the first route. Second route is we remove the existing chiller and add 1 larger chiller that would cover the necessary load for the entire remainder, without, it's not a hodgepodge, but you're adding some smaller fixes in and segregating a little bit. The most efficient way is still kind of under determination. Budget wise, it looks to be that replacing it entirely would actually be more beneficial because of the cost of materials for removal of existing piping for the chiller right now to the air handler units. But either way, we will need 1 more rooftop unit to cover the blue gym, which will essentially cover that entire side, including the locker rooms on that side. Which, just to be clear, those do not get direct air conditioning. What we do is we ramp up the negative pressure within them, so they pull the air essentially from the gym at this point, from the halls, in order to cool it. And we're looking closer to a $520,000 mark right now, which is for the replacement of. Most of that cost does go into a chiller. It's difficult to say when this would happen. I'm still waiting on the other numbers right now, since it is a fairly decent sized project. But it looks on average to be about a 50-week lead time on chillers in general, and about 10 weeks less for a rooftop unit in general. So basically what all of them have said is, you know, you're planning for the following year. You know, outside of that, when we used to make the decision now and be able to have a rooftop and a chiller in by the end of summer. Now that's not saying things can't change. Obviously, we'll be wide open in case somebody has one sitting somewhere across the nation. But as of right now, that's where we landed.
So it would be our goal to bring, the recommendation with the quotes or the bids to the full board in March.
Correct.
Will we'd meet the deadline for expense? The 2024?
September of 2024, I still believe you would meet that deadline.
We're comfortable
And we
with
could,
that?
I did mention that, this is just to one of them, you know, just as what we were kind of doing here with our funding and, trying to nip at it a little bit, as best we could, cause I like to play a low side and a high side and, everything in between, but, he had said, where was I just going with that?
Meeting the expense
It's a deadline.
deadline.
Deadlines, that we can, thank you, mouthy, that we can order the materials and stamp that in time, no matter which way we do go. Even if we did plan to do it in 3 years, he said we technically could pay for it up front if we wanted to, so.
Does this give us 100% coverage then for air AC in KMS?
Kennedy would be completely covered for all intended purposes, yes. There would be, so I know that we had, that original map, I had halls, I think, marked on there, as part of it. That was more or less a way to show that those don't directly have it, but much like the locker rooms, those are designed to take it from other units, rooms, open spaces, to generate that airflow. So those don't technically have it, but they do utilize the cooling. So.
Sure.
Yep.
And then, it sounds like it's cost competitive to go with one large chiller. Is the existing one old enough to justify replacing? I don't recall, you know, if we've replaced it in the last 10 years or not.
So it was difficult because we must have had a massive repair on it. This we actually just found out not too long ago, to some extent or another, because there's 2 different life tags on it. The most recent one is 8 years old, which to me is still somewhat of a baby. So I wouldn't want to remove it, but I'm also going to explore the potential of taking a unit like that in this day and age and a repurpose or a resale for any value. Difficult, but it happens, and it's been happening more and more, again, in this day and age where things are hard to get and people
Right.
just need something now.
Yeah, I think it's a
Yeah.
good idea.
Yep.
I'd hate to install the dual setup only to have to fix the older one in a few years
That's
and incurring the cost of the ESSER dollars we don't have at that time.
definitely. No, and I completely agree, and I think that's what really plays a big part in it is, you know, you gotta remember that sits outside on the ground all year round. Now, you know, 8 years again, being in schools and other municipalities, you know, a chiller you feel like has been around for eternity, but, you know, frankly, they take a lot of wear and tear and they could go anytime after you install them, but, you know, those first 10 years are a big make or break, and once you hit that 10, you know, you might have something detrimental happen. So I agree. I think, you know, the rip and replace outside of, we're gonna have more mechanicals even at that point to worry about. So more PMs moving forward, and things of that nature. So I'll definitely be having that in a full layout, just to kind of compare the two in case we do have some more questions like that moving forward.
So I was looking at the cost. It looks like you had a little cost breakdown of like monthly expenditures to run it.
Yes.
And I'm just a little confused, and I want to make sure I'm getting it right. It looks like it was computed 8 hours a day, 20 days a month for 12 months. It says update 7 months. Would we be running the air conditioning in that building 7 months out of the year?
That was with the rooftop unit. That would then be heat and cooling.
Okay.
I believe is what that was meant.
So
I'm sorry.
that's not just running AC. That would be
No. Yep.
And
That
then-
would be both of them, the units in general. So I mean, it just fits in that it's a
Yep.
you know, heating cooling unit.
Yeah. So it wouldn't be an exorbitant cost to add this. I see next to that you have KMS $860 a month, estimated cost KMS $6,020. That was confusing
So
to me.
the ones above, the Amy Bell County line, Rockfield, Mac, KMS, those were the initial ones. Instead of being underlined, they're supposed to be striked out.
Mhm.
So ignore those and then just continue with the estimated cost of KMS. So if you
So
delete
and
the
that,
rest
so
of
is
it.
that supposed to be the estimated total cost between all of them would have been 6,020?
That would be for the 7 months. if you ran the KMS for
I
7 months.
got you, the
Yeah,
total.
sorry about that.
No,
I was
that's okay, I just wanted to
confused.
make sure that wasn't per month.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Good catch.
Any more questions for mitigation?
No, I think we can move on. Item 2.
The next area is mental health.
Thank you. So I wanted to give you a little more background into some of the questions that came up during the last Finance Committee meeting were, what does mental health look like in our schools, and what are some key performance indicators that could help to quantify what our staff are experiencing and seeing. And so what I wanted to share with you is information that I've gathered from our staff over the last couple of weeks that they have been so gracious in helping me to accumulate. And just give some general summaries of observations. I wanted to share some of those, again, just general and overview, and then talk about some of the data points that we've collected. Just in terms of what it looks like generally, it's students with anxious thoughts, worrying, that's limiting their ability to attend to class instruction, and thoughts related to depression, sometimes interfering with their ability to goal set and complete assignments. Occasionally there are explosive behaviors of crying, screaming, or other physical acting out types of behaviors. We're noticing visits to our health room for physical pains that are later determined to be more emotionally rooted than actually physical in nature. We're noticing increases in those visits. So to capture those into 2 different areas, attendance into class and instruction, and then some disciplinary matters, we're noticing those to increase. And we're also noticing more reports of self-harm and suicidal ideation among our students. So then to put those into, we know we're observing that, staff are experiencing that, to try to put that into something that's quantifiable in nature. We identified 4 different areas that we thought if we could put some numbers around these, it would, again, just help to quantify what we're experiencing. So we identified 4 areas, one being health room visits for psychometric concerns, the second being unplanned visits to our student services staff, such as our counselors, social workers, psychologists. 3 being disruptive behaviors, which are interrupting the routines of other students, our student services staff, and our administration. And then the number of risk assessments that have been completed. And we looked at this over the course of the entire first semester. And so looking at health room visits for psychometric concerns over the course of the first semester, at the elementary level, there were 242 visits. And if we break that out by grade level, across all 4 buildings, at the kindergarten level, K-5, that's 23 visits. First grade is 34. Second grade, 27. It increases for 3rd grade at 52, and 4th grade, 56, and then 5th grade, 40. And then if we look at similar visits at the middle school, 6th grade was 10 over the course of the first semester, 7th grade was 17, and 8th grade was 34. And then at the high school level, 9th grade were 50 visits, 10th grade 21, 11th grade 15, and 12th grade 8, for a total of 94 visits to the health room during first semester for psychosomatic types of complaints. And then just general unplanned visits to our student services providers, again, our counselors, social workers, psychologists. And if we think about unplanned being something that's not scheduled, something that is more last minute in nature, it's not proactive, it's not anticipated, it's more reactive, and something that comes up within the last 24 hours or in the moment during the day. That number of visits at the elementary level for first semester was 973. And at Kennedy, that would be 405. And at the high school, 1,496 unplanned visits to our student services staff over the course of the first semester. And then in terms of some of those disruptive behaviors, and those increase as the students get older, the visits to the health room service providers. What we're noticing is disruptive behaviors decrease as students work through the grades. So those disruptive behaviors at the elementary level was 57 for first semester, 100 at Kennedy for first semester, and 40 at the high school for first semester. And then just another data point as well, and there's some overlap here in some of these numbers, but just single out risk assessments that needed to be completed for our students across the grade levels. And risk assessments being for reasons such as students writing, texting, posting something related to self-injury or suicide, either reported by staff or peers, students talking about self-injury or suicidal thoughts, or students reporting for themselves self-injury or suicidal thoughts. Risk assessments that were completed based upon those concerns at the elementary level, 15 during the first semester. At Kennedy it was 20, and at the high school it was 33. And then each of those risk assessments results in a number of different paths on the other end. It's parent-guardian contact for sure, resources made available to parents for community resources, follow-up communication with students, family, possible mental health providers if students are seen in the community, and then possibly contact with acute care services if it's necessary. So I just wanted to help illustrate what mental health looks like in our schools right now. So then when we think about what we can do or try to do moving forward with the resources that we're considering, some of the parameters that we've talked about and we know in terms of planning for those needs. Mental health can be very broad in trying to truly define what it is, and knowing that there's some consideration to what is educational in nature versus what is treatment in nature, and thinking about one-time expenses that we can commit that would have the biggest impact over time, the most residual benefit. Thinking about things such as train the trainer approaches where they're available, so we can train our staff to continue on the training for our greater staff. And then thinking about not only professional development for our staff, but also direct services to our students and what intervention could look like for our students. And so these approaches that are in the plan don't treat specific diagnoses, but the idea is if we can cast the biggest net to try to work through help students work through as many needs as possible with something that's not treatment based and an ongoing expense, what could that look like? So a big portion of it comes to trauma sensitive schools, and working with, there's an agency in the area, they're called WellPoint Care Network, and they're a very reputable mental health provider and connected to some of the foundational research in ACEs, which is blanking out, adverse childhood experiences, so quantifying adverse childhood experiences and the impact that those have had on students. And so taking the train the trainer approach, bringing back that information to our school staff. WellPoint has their own model that they've developed, which it's called the 7 essential ingredients, and some of those ingredients include helping staff understand the prevalence of those ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, which is much more common than many of us even realize. thinking about how to shift perspective amongst those working in close proximity to students, such as, and this is just one example, but thinking about how the questions can be changed from what's wrong with a student to what's happened to a student and how can we support students. So just shifting some of the questions, that's just one example. Helping staff understand that giving them strategies to help students regulate that might have some cognitive approach aspect to it, but also using some kinetic approaches to help students engage that where we're taking a cognitive approach with them might not be as effective as taking a movement approach with them. And using strategies such as, and WellPoint just gives some examples of drumming, singing, dancing, yoga, just things that get them moving to help regulate. And then the importance of relationships and establishing strong relationships that help to create resilience among our students and shield them from the effects of their past trauma, give them a sense of connectedness with our staff and other students around them. So that's the essence of what trauma-sensitive schools, what training the trainer would help to build as a staff, those competencies to be more sensitive and supportive and trauma-informed and somewhat therapeutic without being therapy in nature for our students. And so that's the 16 staff going to the trauma-sensitive schools training, and that's a 5-day training for Train the Trainers. And there are different sessions offered throughout the months ahead. So that's one item. Another item then is it takes more of the direct intervention to students approach. And there's a type of therapy that is common in schools. It's called dialectical behavioral therapy, or DBT. And CISA, who we rely on for many resources, offers trainings in this periodically. And again, it's not mental health treatment per se, but it's direct counseling for students. It would help our staff, our counseling staff, to know how to identify student goals for counseling sessions. It would teach them to use ongoing assessment to determine effective solutions when counseling students, and teaches them step-by-step processes for providing skills and coaching to students on the fly during the school day, so it is intended to reduce the amount of time that students are missing class, coming out of class. And that is two full days of training provided by CISA. Those are virtual sessions currently, what they've offered. And then the third item is the on-demand resource library, and that by name, that is Beyond Treats and Timeouts. It's called On-Demand Support for Challenging Behaviors, and it's put together by a group called Inclusive Schooling and some well-known experts in inclusive education that we've attended their presentations as special ed staff and regular ed staff, trying to find ways to help generate inclusive classroom environments for students with disabilities and a whole range of other needs, and challenging behaviors and trauma would fit into there as well, students who present with a variety of needs. Those are 4 120-minute on-demand sessions that provide practical strategies for shifting from behavior management to more supportive approaches that foster kindness, creativity, and acceptance among our staff and students, and focuses on relationships and helping students feel safe, and again, establishing secure attachments to.
What was the name of that company?
It's Inclusive Schooling.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Julie Costin, Dr. Christy Predick-Francek, and Dr. Kate McLeod. And then the final item, and that was Yeah, that's a district-wide licensure that all of our staff could access and be intentionally trained upon, including some of our hourly staff. And that it's something that would, we think about things that are residual in terms of benefits. This would be something that has a lifetime access for us to, as new needs arise or new staff come on board. This is something that I see us being able to reference for a long time and use. And then the final item is a program called Breathe for Change, which focuses more specifically on the movement aspects of intervention with students, and it involves teaching of yoga classes and students participating in yoga type activities, so that there's movement-based strategies for helping our students regulate, particularly students with more neurodiverse needs and students with limited communication skills. This might be more effective for working with them than some of the more cognitive-based talking through kinds of strategies. So those are the 4 different resources. And then as we think about when we would implement those, it would be through our fall PD days in August, and then staff meetings throughout the year, as well as for that on-demand resource library. I imagine targeted time for that, but then that would be available indefinitely as particular needs surface. And our goal is wanting to have as many students actively engaged in their learning for as much of their school day as possible. So the more we can increase their engagement and decrease the number of disruptions that staff and administrators are experiencing, decrease the visits to the health room, the more our students will progress within the curriculums that we're making available for them.
I don't know if you had anything.
I don't have anything. Go ahead.
So, Todd, I know you and I talked offline after the last presentation of this ESSER update. And obviously, it's come a long way since then. I was pretty happy to see, hear some of the data. I would say I'd like to see it, because it helps me retain that, especially referencing back to it. So if that's possible, we could provide that, that'd be great.
Sure.
And we talked in our discussion focused on the restraints of ESSER dollars being a one-time expense, and how do you make a lasting impact, as well as the correct lasting impact. And that specifically the trainers versus just training a couple of staff to do it. I think that leaves a legacy impact as far as being able to continue and or infuse it throughout the district. So I was happy to see that. The dialectical behavior therapy skills seems interesting. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. I know it's not I think it's probably more technique based on this level of implementation, right, than it would be like an actual therapy session or something, right?
It's techniques and how to frame counseling sessions.
For the
Yep.
staff as a
Yep.
professional development. Okay. I appreciate the more finite detail on some of those things that we've discussed, making their way in here to make that lasting impact. I know we infused probably a lot more dollars in it too, which probably gave you that ability to expand that. For the 16 staff that would attend like the train the trainer session and that DTH training, is that the same 16 staff, or would it be different?
It's currently our counselors, social workers, and psychologists. So each of our pupil services, quote unquote mental health staff. So that's who that's intended to be.
And would that cover all of them, or is that the good nucleus of it in order to then infuse it to the rest of them?
That's all of them, and then that would help us to infuse it throughout all of the other staff. Some of those staff members are in dedicated buildings, others cross buildings and have connections with a variety of different staff. So there's that element to it as well. That there's
Sure.
in-house within buildings and then crossing buildings as well.
Good. I think it's a creative way to extend the life, quote unquote, of the ESSER dollar, right? We know it's going away. This is gonna be a lasting impact, or potentially a lasting impact, so I appreciate that.
Hey Todd, for the numbers, I think unplanned visits to the counselors, those numbers, were those for the last 12 months or since the beginning of this school year?
For the first semester.
First semester.
Yep.
And I think the unplanned visits were the highest numbers, you know, that you gave. Are our counselors handling this? Are they pulling their hair out, or how are the counselors doing?
Well, they're very eager to have more resources that are concrete in nature and consistent around the district. So especially as we think about students moving from elementary to middle to high, they're eager for resources to be able to rely on.
Okay.
Next we have the safety goal, which Justin will cover.
Good evening.
Good evening. Borrow Mike's seat.
Justin, it's
All right.
yours.
So, so in the safety area, there were a number of places that most of them I brought forward last time to Finance Committee. The first one is the cameras and intercoms. I have updated quotes and numbers. I engaged with Nelco Electric, which has done a lot of electrical contracting for us for getting the new cable runs that would be necessary for additional security camera coverage within our buildings. And then updating certain cameras in certain areas to the 360-degree cameras, which will cover a wider range of the space there. Parts of this plan involve taking the existing cameras from those areas and then moving them so that, we've reduced the amount of unused cameras. Actually, there's no unused cameras. The current ones that are in place would go elsewhere within the building, some of them to the new runs. The next item was two-way radios, which is currently tabled at this time. We're taking that entire plan back to the safety committee to talk about, what our existing number of radios are, how they're distributed throughout the buildings, who they're distributed to, and what the planning, the overall district-wide radio plan might be, and just revisiting that kind of from the ground up. So there is no, that isn't factored into this particular budget number right now. The KMS Gold Intercom is the same line item that was brought forward in December, the $900. And then the last one on this particular list is the door barricades, which isn't really technology, but I talked with Brittany about that, and the door barricades would be changed to the night locks, which are kind of the industry standard for those door barricades, and the numbers are there with the 506 doors district-wide at $85 a lock.
So Justin can answer any questions that you have, but later on tonight he will bring quotes for the cameras and not the intercoms, correct? Because
Correct.
they were below the $15,000 mark. But we are going to go through the process of the two-way radios. And then the other one, maybe Frank can help me with a little more detail on it. We've been looking at door barricades for about 4 to 6 months. We have worked with our fire department and our police department. We have done our drills. We started with looking at our outswinging doors. Obviously, outswinging doors are harder to barricade than in-swinging doors. So we took a count of 172 of our doors were outswinging doors. We then purchased 10, am I correct? 10 locks or devices to test them at, I believe, 2 elementaries, a middle and the high school, Frank?
Yep.
And we found out, and we didn't want to purchase a large number of them without testing them, and we found out that the ones that we were testing weren't something that we wanted to move forward with. So then we proceeded to look into the night locks, which again is known at a lot of other districts and areas. So we then reached out to the fire department and the police department in Washington County as well to say, is this something that would be against code or approved? And they've approved those as well. So we have an email chain of all the steps that we've gone through in the past 4 to 5 months with this. And so this is another suggestion. We're going to talk about it at our safety committee on Friday, just to get a little more information, and then if it would move forward, it would come to the full board for approval before we, so we'll probably again buy a number of them, test them, making sure that's what we want to move forward with before this comes to the full board for approval. But we just wanted to give it as an update, as an ESSER option.
Okay. And those outswinging doors, are they also lockable from the inside?
Mm-hmm. All our doors are lockable.
They're all lockable, so it's, I mean, I think the Night Lock, is that the brand you're talking about,
Mhm.
or Night Lock? I think it's a good idea, and we should proceed, but it's harder to kick in a door that swings outward, and if it's locked, you know, it's harder to get in. I think those are might be the more safe doors, actually, than the ones that swing inward. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Well, but if somebody has a key, or they're able to jimmy the lock,
There's
they can just
nothing-
pull it right.
yeah, there's nothing precluding the door from, like an in-swinging door, there's a barricade, the teachers barricade, so you have another layer
Yeah.
to go through.
But I think the Night Lock would still be useful on the in-swinging door also.
All
for
doors,
the
yes.
same
It
reason.
would-
Yep,
it-
yep.
the-
Yeah,
that
there's
would be
two
all doors.
versions of it, actually.
Yeah.
I think the inward is about $10 less than the outward swinging ones.
Similar,
The
So it-
estimate here is for the higher.
Yeah, it's a general, yep.
similar to multiple conversations tonight, we're trying to build that consistency
Right,
in all
right.
of these things across the district.
Okay, very good.
Do you have any questions regarding the cameras for Justin? Otherwise, you can ask him when he comes with the quotes later tonight.
Yeah, I think we can talk about that later tonight. And as far as the Night Locks are concerned, is there any issue with funding? Or is that gonna be ESSER dollars also? I think so, right?
Mhm.
Okay, very good.
And then we have our last area of loss of learning.
To build off of Dr. Reuter's comment about building consistency, the loss of learning plan is still built off of priorities that we already have in the district around developing consistent expectations for learners, effective assessment practices, and instruction that can be responsive to learning needs. The plan that is in this update is very similar to the one that I presented last time with a few updates. I've been working with the CESA consultant from CESA 6 Math Institute to help drill down what the math plan would be and how that would be implemented in terms of cost, given the size of the contract that we would like and the number of professional development sessions that we are going with. We're not getting the same rate that we got before, so she's giving us a better rate because of how much we're working with her. So that piece is there. The math, the professional development plan that we have currently is centered around bridges, curriculum, and then potentially around illustrative math. We haven't adopted it yet. However, the practice is that she's looking at supporting woodwork with any curriculum, which is part of a centerpiece of all the professional development that's being provided, that it's not necessarily curriculum dependent, but it is best practice dependent, so that we can be responsive to learners. Part of that professional development is monitoring student learning in the ACT, so formative assessment. So we're monitoring students as they learn so that we can be responsive to them, identify their needs early, and then respond to that before it becomes a significant learning gap. Another piece that's been added to the plan is around K-8 math interventions. So I've been working with the interventionists that we have in the district to identify what gaps we currently have in terms of a tier 2 or a tier 3 response that we have. Within the Bridges curriculum, there is a tier 2 response as well as illustrative math. But at the middle school and at the elementary level, interventionists conveyed the need for more tier 3 interventions, so that would be targeting a specific learning gap that they have identified. So that has been built into the cost. And then the last major adjustment that was made was to letters training. And that was because I worked with principals to determine kind of the capacity of our current teaching staff and the level of interest that would be there. And I adjusted it down from 8 teachers being involved in the letters training down to 4.
All right, I don't have any questions.
Nothing?
Looks like it's in alignment with a lot of the discussions we've had, so appreciate it.
Are you able to find math curriculum that doesn't include Common Core? Is it out there?
So the curriculums that we look at, we're looking at the alignment to the Wisconsin state standards. So when we talk about the skills that we're looking to prioritize within our math reviews and then how we articulate that through our curriculum, it's all based on the Wisconsin state standards.
Very good.
Which has gone away from, my understanding is it's starting to lean away from the Common Core theories of life.
In general, when you take a look at the Common Core national standards and the Wisconsin state standards, there are going to be similarities that you're going to find in terms of math skills that are being asked for. And another piece to that would be like math practices, that you're going to find similarities between the Common Core standards and then the Wisconsin state standards when we talk about mathematical practices. But some of those things are so inherent in math that it would be hard to articulate standards that didn't say that. So problem solving is an example of a Common Core math practice and a Wisconsin state math practice. And that's inherent in math, would be developing that problem solving and reasoning ability in our students.
Okay.
We'll continue to give updates on the ESSER every month.
Okay, very good. So that's it for 6D, unless there's any other questions. Sounds like we're good. Item 6E, January variance report.
In front of you tonight is the January 31st, 2023 variance report comparing last year expenses as of that date compared to this year for our special ed funds and our general ed funds as being our 2 most expensive funds that we have. You can see that most of the areas have reduced spending compared to the previous year. We do see non-capital purchases and capital purchases higher than we did at this time last year. We do have a reduced budget we do have an increased budget compared to last year, but the percentage of budget spent is around the 41–42%. So we're still tracking the same as we were last year. Special education, similar. Most of the areas are lower than last year except purchase services. Those are slightly increased from the previous year. We are spending, as I said, at a similar rate as last year, but you can see that the encumbered amount this year is about $650,000 more than encumbered at this time last year. So the money is designated or in a purchase order process. The check just has not been cut. So you should see in the near future that those areas that are lower will be higher than the previous year. Questions regarding the January variance report?
I'm good. Russ?
Found one I don't have a question on.
All right, very good. Okay. I think we're good there. Item 7, unfinished business. I believe there was none. Item 8A, monthly purchase requests exceeding $15,000. I guess we've got Justin Baumgartner.
All right. So this is for the 23 360-degree cameras to be placed strategically throughout Kennedy and Germantown High School to bolster that security presence, as well as 480-degree cameras to be spread across the PAC and outside campus to cover spaces that don't have camera coverage. most notably inside the auditorium seating area of the PAC, and then there's the door that Kennedy uses for the exterior, or going outside for recess, doesn't actually have coverage of the door area itself. And so that would be an exterior camera that would be placed outside of there. And then I have the different quotes from Nilco Electric as well as CDW for those different cameras and cable runs.
Do you want to go through those quotes? Do you have one selected vendor over another one? Or they're both, you have to use both of the vendors because one's electrical and one's
Right.
mechanical.
Exactly.
Thank you. And again, these would be used with ESSER funding, and we would be installing the cameras, correct?
Yes, the camera installation would be handled by the technology department. So the actual electrical runs, they would go and they would terminate them at the location of the camera, and they'd give us a little bit of leeway, generally speaking about 15 feet of extra cable up in the ceiling so that we can strategically place that, and then the technology staff does that actual installation.
Okay, very good. Tom?
Yeah, one question. Looking at the Nalco Electric quote, are we actually putting a camera in a dressing room?
No, it is not inside a dressing room. That's the
Okay.
hallway outside of the dressing room.
All right.
So
Thank you for clarifying.
The room number quotes on there refer to the door that they are outside of. There aren't cameras inside specific rooms except for at the PAC where they would be inside that auditorium space.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
It's a general sense of coverage. Do we feel like this is going to kind of knock it down?
Yeah.
Short term, I guess. But.
These camera placements and types were determined. I walked through each of the buildings with the SROs, and they have a pretty good knowledge of what all those different camera angles are, and a lot of those pain points that they had talked about. Where if an incident were to have occurred in a particular area, that a camera wasn't close enough. So that's where these cameras were born of. I guess the best example of those would be the center of the hallways at GHS. There's kind of that main circuit on both the first and second floor. There's no cameras in the center of those, so we're talking really long stretches of distance. And as you get further away from the camera, obviously the resolution gets worse. You can't really zoom in on those particular areas, and so those 360 cameras placed in the center of those hallways will mitigate that significantly. The Kennedy ones, the main focus in particular were interior spaces covering doorways that didn't have good coverage. Either it was a super long distance or there was no coverage at all. So Officer Kevin and I went around, and he was really on the ball, and he was actually talking to me about those before the ESSER dollar discussion came up earlier this school year.
I'm glad to hear that's a conversation that took place, because obviously they know where they've been. Man, I wish I had something there, right?
Yep.
When they're trying to investigate something, so that's fantastic. Thank you.
Are any of these cameras replacing cameras that we talked about in the past that didn't meet security standards, or?
Those have all been purchased already
those
and
are
are
done.
in the process of being replaced. So we've had a pretty significant number of those already
Okay.
replaced.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tom?
I see this as for the cameras and for the networking to support the cameras. Is there going to be any increased cost for data storage of the video feed, maybe on a monthly basis or a yearly basis, that we'd have to account for?
No. Right now, our data storage for cameras, and that's an algorithm of what resolution the cameras are at, how many different cameras you're running, and the length of time in which that data is stored. And right now, we kind of set like 30 days of back storage. So as new footage comes in, old footage is deleted. And so in general, we try to be able to reach back 30 days. And when I went over this with Nick earlier this year, I think we were averaging like 38 or 39 days in the past. So we have some room to spare in terms of the amount of storage space that we have for being able to go back and look at things in the past.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll bring forward I'll make the motion to bring forward to the Board of Education with a positive recommendation to move forward with the camera and intercom purchase installation for an amount not to exceed $45,888.00.
Second.
Okay, motion by Russ Ewart, second by Tom Barney. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. Okay, item 8A2, Amy Bell boiler replacement. I knew I'd seen boiler in here somewhere.
Yes, so in December, we had a alarm going off on our program showing that boiler 1 was out at Amy Bell. And as I kind of stated here, upon further review, it looked, well, it's deemed that the heat exchanger, burner element, and several other gaskets related to that area are shot. And at this point, those are kind of the heart and soul of these boilers. So we had to take into consideration a complete replacement, just due to the fact that the boiler is 15 years old. Again, I would not call that a granddaddy by any means, but in this given, and for as much as they do work on and off for that school, I think this is unfortunately a bittersweet opportunity to do a capital improvement a few years early. So I definitely think the replacement personally would be the best. Every contractor, I brought in the 3, Ahern, Dillett, and Butters, every contractor agreed replacement would be for our best interest as far as money spent. I did receive a proposal from Ahern a day late. I didn't necessarily have it on a contract on an end of like an RFP, but I will say they are still at $46,344. So, which in that case, Butters Fetting is still our lowest cost.
We're on 1 boiler now at Amy Bell?
Yep.
And it's able to keep up?
Yeah, so we had to do some minor modifications initially because of the ramp up in heat that boiler wanted to do, which when we were there, I think Chris may have seen, you've seen some pumps leaking. That's from some of that, the expansion of the heat wanting to go as fast as it could. We did get it to the point where it leveled out and we are heating. We're okay. We haven't had any major complaints at all outside your typical 1 or 2 degree fluctuation. So we are able to cover, but the idea is that they feed off of one another for efficiency purposes and typically lifespan.
Are the 2 that are in there, are they the same age?
Yes. Yep.
So the one that's working right now?
He's working overtime.
It is, and we actually just had the prior to this happening, we just had the preventative maintenance done on these boilers, taken apart, everything cleaned, elements cleaned out. Unfortunately, you can't see when they're just going to give up, but everything was taken care of. That boiler is in good condition, and technically it's the number 2 boiler, so that one has ran a fair amount less than the first. Because it sounds like up until 2 years ago, they didn't have the A to B sequence. It would just be keep one on for a few months, but then a few months turns in the winter, and then you just have that one left on, kind of like an old steam boiler setup style. But within the last 2 years, they have been doing the switch off.
Okay.
But in this case, I think it's good enough to hold, but I wouldn't want to put all the...
Sure, so it's got less hours
Yep.
than boiler 1.
Yep.
Okay, very good. Any questions or?
Ready for a motion?
I'm ready.
Motion to move forward with a positive recommendation to the full board to approve the replacement of the boiler at Amy Bell Elementary using Butters Fetting Company in an amount not to exceed $44,000 to be funded out of the capital improvements budget.
Second.
Okay, motion by Tom Barney, second by Russ Ewart. One last question for me. Is the new boiler as efficient as the old one, or a little bit better?
A little bit better. They're actually, it is the same make, same brand, but they're about 15% more efficient across the board, generally speaking. So definitely improvements. I think these are good boilers. I mean, they're easily considered efficient compared to some that I've seen, but we've had those small step ups without hitting that next level and next generation style. Where we're looking at a much bigger ball player then.
Okay. Yeah, I do know the boilers because I've seen them in past building tours
Oh, sure.
by the school board.
Sure, the friendly green,
Well, I don't,
mint.
I
or
thought they
whatever.
were
Can only fit like 3 people in
I
that
thought they
room,
were
so-
blue maybe,
There's
but
a
yeah.
couple, they make like a off aqua blue, and then I call it a green mint.
Yeah, I mean, I was impressed the size of them for the total square area of the building.
Sure.
I mean, they're very small.
Yeah, and that's right there. That's where you're already being efficient in space, and that
Right,
means
right.
something for the entire building.
Okay, that's it for questions. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion carries. And what's left? Oh, yeah, item 8A3, library Chromebook purchases, Justin Baumgartner.
All right, so this is for the purchase of 125 Asus CR1100 flip touchscreen Chromebooks and their corresponding Google Education licenses. This will be utilizing common school funds. We saw kind of an unexpected bump in those this year, as well as we have a planned amount every year that would go towards technology in the buildings that all of the students can use. Jake Miziak brought to me the idea of putting some touchscreen Chromebooks in our buildings. None of our Chromebooks are currently touchscreen. That makes them less of an ideal device for especially those younger grades, K through 2. We do have some amount of iPads in the buildings in those areas, but there are things that the iPads can't do that the Chromebooks can, and so bringing these touchscreen Chromebooks in and putting them in carts in the elementary libraries will kind of expand, what we're capable of doing in our classrooms in the future. There's no carts involved with this. When we went to 1-to-1 5 years ago, we had actually an abundance of carts that we have kept that are in really great shape, so we're just utilizing some of the existing carts that we have, and this would just be for the Chromebooks and the education licenses.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good.
Thanks for the detail on why touchscreen.
Sure.
That was going to be one of the questions I asked.
Mm-hmm.
Which grade are we talking about, or grades?
They'll be available to K through 5.
Oh, okay. All right, very good. All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Make the motion to bring forward to the Board of Education with a positive recommendation to move forward with the Chromebook and licensing purchase for an amount not to exceed $49,000.
Second.
Okay, motion by Russ Ewert, second by Tom Barney. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries. And I
Move
will
adjourn.
accept one more motion. You can't say it before I ask.
Okay, move adjourn.
Okay, motion by Tom Barney, second by Russ Ewert to adjourn. Any questions? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. We are adjourned at 6:51.